Thank you, Mr. Moore. I recognize Ms. Steele of California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman LaHood, for holding this hearing, and thank you all the witnesses coming today. I'm thankful to hear from these leading experts on this, as this committee acts on these issues, and this is very important for our future and our future of generations too. Dr. Corinth, the National Academy of Science report is certainly alarming in their suggestion to elevate the supplemental poverty measure as the nation's headline poverty statistic. We have three leading experts on poverty measurement testifying before our committee today, yet I see none of your names on the list of authors of this report. Did the panel of authors for this report include any conservative perspectives?
Thank you, Ms. Steele, for the question. There were 13 members on the National Academy of Sciences panel which made this recommendation about the SPM. Of those 13, 12 had either donated or worked for a Democratic administration. 0 had donated or worked for a Republican administration. And as you suggested, it's not for lack of supply of willing or capable experts with differing perspectives. As you mentioned, there's people at this table who are not asked to serve. There's others as well who have the expertise, who could have served but were not asked and should have been.
So this report must be really skewed at this point.
It's certainly skewed based on the panel members, and I don't think that it reflects the academic consensus about poverty measurement.
Thank you. Professor Besharov, if I pronounced it wrong, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
You have done a tremendous amount of research on measuring poverty. These measurements are full of deep statistical analysis, but at the end of the day, deciding who is and who isn't in poverty is a moral judgment. Do you think it is right to unelected bureaucrats to have such power, or the ability for one administration to make such dramatic changes to the poverty rate? Do you believe this should be the role of Congress to set the poverty line?
Well, thank you for the question. As I was trying to suggest in my previous answer, we are at an important historical point where many of the norms of the past are changing. The norms about what a president will do or not do without the consent of Congress. And I would put this at that very high level of concern. It is about poverty measurement. It is about food stamp benefits. It is about military action. I can think of all sorts of things that the Congress has, in a sense, delegated great discretion to a president. And the Congress has done that because in the past, the presidents have had guardrails. And I see that changing. I see that changing about social policy. I see it changing about international policy. And in terms of the poverty line, I'm really worried that it gets politicized in both directions. It's one thing to say, well, let's just see if low-income families can get a little bit more money here. The other side of this is if we have a President Trump, I mean, one of the things he could very easily say is, well, let's see how we can benefit the people who voted for me. And I don't think that belongs in a poverty measure, either direction. And I think the only protection for that is a Congress, because even the minority in the Congress can prevent that. So it's important that we constrain the power of the executive, whoever that is.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Meyer, you have done a lot of research on the supplemental poverty measure. This can get very technical, but you can explain in simple terms some of the problems with the SPM and how that measure can inflate and misrepresent current poverty numbers.
Thank you for the question, Representative Steele. I don't have a lot of time, so let me just say that one of the worst problems with the SPM is that you'd like the poverty measure to identify the most deprived individuals, because that's ultimately the goal of poverty measurement. And the supplemental poverty measure in practice does not do a good job of that. It does a worse job than the official poverty measure and consumption poverty measures. One of the reasons for it is the issue that we've been focused on, that it would raise poverty thresholds where people can afford to spend a lot on housing. And those areas tend to be the areas where people are better off by a lot of indicators, and it would cut the poverty thresholds in areas where people are especially suffering.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms.